All right, so in conclusion, what we've seen in this lecture is that modals and tense inflection are both the category T. This explains why they're in complementary distribution, and it explains why every sentence must have one or the other. Right? A sentence is a TP, so it has to have a T. So you pick one type of T or the other type of T, right? A modal or a tense suffix. Modals, so they both occupy the T position, right? They're both T. That's for modals, that's all there is to say. They stay in the T position because they're freestanding words. But if our T is, if we choose to use a tense inflection T, then that's a suffix, and that can't stand on its own in the T position. It has to attach to something, and what we do in English is that we use affix hopping to move the tense inflection onto the verb, and it gives it a host. So what this does is it explains why tense and modals, even though they're both the category T, they occupy different positions, right? The modal stays in T, the tense moves onto the verb due to affix hopping. Okay, so they show up in different positions, but they are the same category, right? We have so much evidence that they're the same category, and it's just this little transformation that makes them show up in different places on the surface. So like I've been saying, affix hopping is a transformation. Okay, and a transformation is any operation that takes a syntactic structure and alters it. Okay, so it doesn't build a new structure by putting together new phrases. Right? It takes a structure you've already constructed and it makes some change to it. In this case, what the affix hopping transformation does is basically it rescues a structure that otherwise wouldn't be pronounceable. Right? If you left the affix in T, then you'd be stuck with something that can't be pronounced, right? Because there's an affix standing on its own. So basically, the role of affix hopping is to tidy up one of these structures, one of these unpronounceable structures. So this is our first transformation. We're going to see several other transformations in this unit, and transformations are always motivated by some reason or another. Okay, so in this case, the motivation is getting an affix onto a host. Okay, so the last part of the slides is just a bit of sort of a practical instructions for how to draw a tree involving tense, and then some practice, and also I'll tell you about the quiz. So how to draw a tree. Okay, so every sentence in English is going to consist of an NP, a T, and a VP. Right? So the first thing to do before you start drawing anything is to identify those three parts. Right? In particular, you need to look for T, right? Because T could either be a modal or it could be tense. So you really need to figure out what is T in this sentence before you're ready to start drawing a structure for the sentence. Okay, so the first thing to do is check for a modal, right? We're looking for T. Modals are easy to spot. So if we've got a modal, right, like in the cat will chase the dog, then that means that modal will is our T. Then you just find your NP and your VP and you draw the structure straightforward. If there's no modal, then there must be tense inflection as a T, right? There has to be, because there's always a T, right? And if it's not a modal, it must be tense inflection. Okay, so if there's no modal, then you need to identify the tense inflection. So the cat chased the dog, no modal here, but we have the ed past tense, right? So our T is the ed past. He calls me. In this case, there's no modal, but there's present tense S on the call. In Sue sang a lullaby. Okay, here there's no modal, but we have a past tense form, right? It's not sing, it's sang. So that means we have tense inflection, right? Now remember, some of our verbs are irregular and they don't actually take the ed suffix, but we still say that the tense here is ed past, right? So sing plus ed past gives us sang. Okay, so abstractly, it's definitely past tense, and abstractly we can say it's ed. Right? It's just when you put ed on sing, what you get is the irregular form sang. And then I like pie. Okay, in this sentence, there's no modal, so it must be T must be tense inflection. Now in this case, there's no suffix on like, right? So you don't see any tense inflection. But remember, there's a null present tense suffix. And if you think about it, this sentence must be present tense, right? If it was past, we would say I liked pie with ed. So this is one of those cases where the absence of a suffix is telling us that it's present tense. So what that means is that we have a null suffix, right? A null present tense suffix. Okay, so the first thing you do is find T, right? So we just found T in a bunch of sentences. Once you've found T, then you're ready to draw the tree, right? The rest is pretty easy. So first thing to do is you write out the words, right? Now that used to be completely straightforward. Now you need to think a little bit about if you have an affix, right? If your T is an affix, then you need to take it off the verb and put it in the T position, right? And you leave the verb in the bare form. Okay, so if we had the cat chased the dog, right, in this sentence, our T is the ed suffix. Right? So what we would actually write to draw the tree is the cat ed passed chase the dog. Okay, so we've identified the tense as the T as ed, and we've taken that off the verb and put it in the T position. Sue sang a lullaby. Okay, here, right, this is the verb sing in the past tense form. Right, so this is like the ed form of sing. So what we would have is Sue, ed past, sing a lullaby. Okay, so we've taken the tense off the verb and we put it in the T position, and then we've got the verb in the bare form, right? Sing. For I like pie, we would say I, null present, like pie. Okay, so in this case, not a whole lot happens, right? So like has the null present tense suffix, so we take that null suffix off the verb, right, which leaves us with like, right? It's still the same because the suffix is null anyway, and we put that null suffix in T, right? So null present is our T. Okay, so these are what you would write out right before you draw your tree, and there's an easy way to check. Okay, so this is a useful tip. So the inflection is always in T, right? The ed and the null, it's in the T position, and that's the same place that a modal goes. So you can always, if you want to check that you've done this correctly, just put in a modal and see if it still works. And if it still works, then you know you've done it correctly. Right? So you can, in the first one, the cat ed chased the dog, replace that ed past T with a modal T, like will. The cat will chase the dog, okay, and it works. So if you can substitute a modal, then you know that you've got the right structure. Right? Same thing, Sue ed sing a lullaby. You could say Sue will sing a lullaby. I null like pie. You could say I will like pie. Okay? So if that works, then you know you've got the right underlying structure. Okay, so now we've figured out what the T is, and we've figured out what the underlying structure is. Okay, now the rest really is easy. So now we're ready for the X bar structure. Right? So we've always got an NP, a VP, and a T. Right? So we identify our NP and our VP. Now we might want to. Sometimes I'm going to ask you to draw out the structure, but for now let's just use a triangle because we're not really worried about the structure of the NP and the VP. And then our head, right, there's always going to be a T, and that's the head, right? So in this case, the past suffix is our T. Then that joins with a complement, the VP, to make a T bar. And then you join in the specifier, the NP, to give a TP. So that's the tree structure. Now we're not quite done, right? Because the sentence isn't the cat id chased the dog, right? We still have to do our transformation. We still have to get that suffix out of T, right, where it really belongs, and put it onto the verb where it's pronounced. Okay, so we need to apply affix hopping. So the way we show that is you just draw an arrow, you add the suffix onto the verb, and you draw a line through the suffix in its original position. Okay? We don't erase the suffix from its original position because we want to show that that really is the T. Right? The T in the sentence really is that ed, right? So that it does belong there. It's just pronounced on the verb. Okay, so this notation shows us both, right? It shows us where it originates, and it also shows us where it's pronounced. Okay, so we get the cat chased the dog, and Sue singed a lullaby. Now, obviously, singed is not the right morphology, right? It should be sang. We're not going to worry about this, like I've been saying, right? Sing plus ed, that the morphology is spelled out as sang. If it bothers you to see singed, you can also write it as sing past. Okay, so rather than writing ed as a suffix, you could write past as a suffix. Okay, either way is fine. Okay, so do whatever you feel more comfortable with. Okay, so here's all that just on one slide. Okay, so how to draw a tree for a sentence. So identify the NP, the T, and the VP, right? It's always going to have those three parts. So to find the T, first check for a modal. If there's a modal, that's the T. If there's no modal, then there's going to be tense inflection. That's the T. Which is one or the other. If it's tense inflection, there are only three possibilities. Either it's past tense ED, present tense S, or null present tense. So you identify the parts, then you write out the words, right, the underlying structure. So if you have tense inflection as your T, then take that affix off the verb, put it in the T position, and leave the verb in the bare form. Right? So if you had sang, you take the past tense off of sang. Right? So you have ed past as your T, and you have the bare form sing as your verb. Okay, and then you're ready to draw the X-bar structure for the whole thing. So you draw that straightforwardly. And then if your T is an affix, right, if your T was a modal, you're done. If your T is an affix, then you have to do affix hopping. That's it. So you draw an arrow to the new position, and you draw a line through the old position. And remember, don't worry about irregular morphology. In the syntax class, we're happy to say that the past tense of sing is singed. Right? Morphology turns that into sang. Okay, so that's it. On Tuesday, we'll be having a quiz. So there's two things I'm going to ask you to do. One, I'm just going to give you several sentences and ask you to identify the underlying form. Right? That means take the tense off the verb and put it in T. Right? So your answers would be like, so if it was the cat chased the dog, you'd say the cat, ED, chased the dog. Sue sang a lullaby. Sue, ED, sing a lullaby. John, S, present, like pie. I, null present, like pie. That's one part. And then I'm going to ask you to draw tree diagrams for two of these simple sentences. Well, one like this that has a tense suffix, and one that has a modal. Okay, so we're going to do both types of T, right? One with a modal, one without a modal. Okay, so I put some practice here for the kind of thing you're going to have to do in the quiz. So here are 10 sentences where you can identify the underlying form. Right? So you need to identify the inflection and take that inflection off the verb and put it in T. And here are the solutions. And then you can also take the same sentences and try drawing the trees for them. And so draw the X-bar structure and show the transformation, show the affix hopping. And I'll post the solutions for these trees on D2L. All right, so that's it. I'll see you back in class on Tuesday.